Hello and welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are joining us from. Welcome back to another Light 'em Up Live, to another Light 'em Up Lounge session with an inspiring guest, a true gentleman of the cigar community, and one of the most accomplished and most well respected retailers and professionals in the cigar industry. It's been a bit in the making, and I'm super honored and happy that Abe Dababneh is here with us today. Abe, first of all, a very warm welcome to the Light 'em Up Lounge, and thank you so much for taking the time and doing us the honors joining us today.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Of course, my setup doesn't look as cool as your setup in the background. I like your setup better.
It's what I call the home bar, just a
I,
few bottles casually lying around. Yours is probably a bit more smoky though, with plenty of cigars on your end.
smoke in here, so it's a little more smoky here.
Hey, let's kick things off, and a lot of people know you, appreciate what you have built with Smoke Inn, the Great Smoke, follow your work with KMA Talk Radio, but you're from Chicago originally, if I'm not mistaken, which you always describe as your city. Now, yet you've become one of the most successful cigar retailers and professionals, not only in Florida, but in the entire US. So your journey into the cigar business and down to Florida actually is a very particular and interesting one. What got you hooked on cigars in the first place?
Um, I was a solo cigar smoker. I mean, I got hooked because, obviously when I played football, it became a celebratory thing. So we would smoke a cigar, somebody would pass around cigars after a win or something. But, back then they were passing around Swisher Sweets or something like that, so that was like probably my first exposure to smoking a cigar. But then I kind of got into it myself, and I really didn't get as much into the culture while I was living in Chicago. I had a humidor at home. I'd have a cigar almost every night before I went to bed, um, and that's kind of how I kind of got started in the cigars, as far as enjoying them as a consumer. And then I started doing wholesaling in Chicago. So then I started as a business, still without really getting into the culture. And it wasn't until I came to a trip to Florida and spent about 10 days here at a local cigar shop, and I really got exposed to the culture. And that's really the push that kind of made me say, this is way better than what I'm doing right now. So that's kind of what got me into the cigar business. Honestly, it wasn't as much the product as it was the culture of the community of cigar smokers that I was really attracted to. And I think that's what I've always been attracted to. And that's why we've always been very experience oriented, whether it's been in our retail stores or virtual events or our annual events. And I think it resonates with the consumer. And I think it's been a key to our success.
Why do you think that the cigar community attracts such a unique talent of people, and why is exactly what you just described, that sense of camaraderie and the whole lifestyle around cigars, why is it so different to so many other industries out there?
It is different. It's different on the consumer level. It's different on the retail level, manufacturer level. You'll see things happen in this industry you just don't see in other industries. Um, it's like one of those things where people like to know they belong with other people. They find a commonality, and the cigar is such an easy commonality. I'll never forget my good friend Tom Reiner, who was with Davidoff here for a stint. I'll never forget. He invited me to go see Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals in Tampa, because that's where their headquarters was in, and they were playing the Chicago Blackhawks. So here I am in Tampa, and I'm wearing a Chicago Blackhawks jersey, and there were a lot of people wearing Chicago Blackhawks jerseys in Tampa, and it was kind of cool. But every time you walked by a complete stranger, we were high-fiving each other like we knew each other for 20 years. You know, it was just we had that instant commonality and common ground. And like literally, like if you saw us, if you were a stranger looking at us saying hi, high-fiving, even saying a few words, you thought like we were friends, like we knew each other for 20 years. We had never met. I mean, you was complete utter stranger. I think that's kind of what it is in the cigar community, right? There's prospectively, there's not a lot of us. You know, I mean, we are a small niche community. So I think we cherish it and we bond quickly with other people who share that passion more than other things. Because I think, you know, other things, it's not so niche and it's not so, I mean, I don't want to say the word small, but it's not a big community, really, relatively speaking. So when you come across people who are very like-minded in a very small group, I think there's just an instant bond there and a commonality where you'll see people from two completely different universes sitting and relating with each other like they're on the same level. I think it's kind of brings everybody to a same level point, and people are okay with it, and it's a great thing.
Also, it's probably one of the more heavily contested industries where you almost feel like you got to be united and you got to stick together because there's so many other looming threats and difficulties going on that probably that also has a uniting effect.
Part of it, though, I wish the community would be a little more together when it comes to stuff like that. Unfortunately, there's still a large percentage of our culture and community who aren't really on top of those things and kind of don't become aware until it's too late. And that's something that we as a community and an industry have been really working hard to change over the past 10 years, try to get people woke to situations before it's too late. Because we've seen it all too often where something gets passed or something gets done. Everybody, like, how did this happen? And, you know, I think that's a part of our community we still have to work on.
That's an excellent point. Now it's one thing to go from enjoying premium cigars every now and then and appreciating the community and the camaraderie, but turning it into a business and especially running such a tight but huge and successful ship like you do, that's a whole different animal. How about that business side of the industry, and when did you feel like this could turn into something more than just a beautiful pastime and something that you just enjoy for pure pleasure?
Well, there are different ways people get in this industry. There is a percentage of people get in this industry as a hobby. It's not really a business. Um, it's a passion they have. They dreamed of always having a cigar shop. They have the wherewithal. They open a cigar shop, and typically those aren't typically the most well-run businesses because
Mm.
it wasn't birthed as a business. Um, I got in this as a business, so um, I as far as how I run our business side of it, I just always run it as a business, never from the perspective of a fan or an admirer, because my personal feelings sometimes don't align with the consumer's feelings, who's ultimately the people we serve. So that's the feelings you have to be in touch with, and the needs you have to be in touch with, you know. Um, so when you approach it like that, you're really approaching it like a business. I know guys who order brands they only like and they only like to smoke, you know. And if I did that, I wouldn't have probably 50% of my humidor, you know. And nothing against those brands, they're just not my cup of tea, nothing I would personally grab. Doesn't mean I don't have a lot of patrons who they love that cigar. So, you know, when you approach things as a business, sometimes as far as the ultimate things that will relate to your consumer and product, sometimes your feelings aren't the ones that need to be considered. And I think that's a lot of times where some people will make a mistake on the retail side. We just always try to run it as a business. And as far as our service is, look, I'm a consumer. I get served every day from other companies. So I just take the standards that I would like to have and I would expect, and I we make sure we translate that down to the consumer level. You know,
Is that something that was always very clear to you and you strategically implemented that in the first place, or is
um,
that a natural evolution over time?
I think it was bred in. You know, I grew up in a grocery business with my father, who we just made our 25th anniversary cigar. We dedicated it to my father in tribute. Actually, it's what I'm smoking now, the Raji by Drew Estate. Um, I grew up working with him since as far back as I can remember. I mean, I think he was taking me to work with him when I was 4 years old, and by 8 years old, I was ringing a register. So it was a smaller grocery business. It wasn't any of the big chains or close to anything size of a big chain, but it was loved by the community. So even when one of the big chain outfits literally opened up a block away, it never affected our business. Our business continued to grow. So I just how watched how my father interacted, not honestly, not just with the consumers, how he just interacted with his staff and his employees and how he dealt with them. And I think that's just what made me, it wasn't an evolution. It was more of an inbred breeding, being exposed to it growing up. And I think that's what I attribute to most of my principles or philosophies. I mean, granted, they've evolved and they've changed because the world's changed and the scope has changed, but the root elements that led to everything started there.
And would you also say that is kind of a natural entrepreneurial spirit that you have in your DNA that made it easier for you to go on that journey? Because I mean, as an entrepreneur myself, we all know it can be a lonely and it can be a challenging path that you decide to walk down. Do you think that's something you got to have in your DNA as well?
I think children of entrepreneurs typically make the best entrepreneurs, because they see it. It's not a new experience. I used to see my dad get up at 2 in the morning during holidays, big holidays, where and go and get there 4 or 5 hours before anybody else because he'd need to start prepping things in the meat counter and stuff like that. So you see the sacrifice, you see the dedication, you see what it takes, the extra measures he would go to save or do something, or and we're creatures of habit. We get exposed to that, we see that becomes what we think is normal. I mean, that's the norm. It's not till you get older and you start interacting with other companies, you realize, well, this is not the norm. This is some exceptional shit going on over here, right? And you don't
For
realize
sure.
that later. But as a child growing up, you see it, that's just the norm. You think every operator in business runs this way. So no, it's definitely some form of environmental influence and growing up in that things. And for the most part, like I said, I most of the people who I know who are really successful entrepreneurs come from a family of entrepreneurs because they see it. It doesn't mean you can't become one, and if your family didn't come from one, but it just helps and it gives you an advantage because what you've seen as the norm, especially if you come from a family of successful entrepreneurs. Like I said, it's a norm for you, where for someone else, it's a development. They have to learn, make mistakes, learn what doesn't work well with consumers, what does, and how to flourish. So it helps without a doubt.
Speaking of mistakes, do you feel like you made some critically important mistakes along the journey as well that ultimately made who you are today?
Um, yeah, my philosophy tends to really exist in the universe that there are no critical mistakes, because the only way you have a critical mistake is you're not really happy where you're at. I'm very happy where I'm at in my life, so I can't say anything was a critical mistake, because if that mistake wasn't made, I might not be here right now. So, are there things that I say, "Oh, I regret," or "Man, I wish I would have done that"? Absolutely. I don't think anybody lives life without those feelings, or at one point or another. But critical mistakes, I don't believe in critical mistakes. I think the only people who really say they've made critical mistakes if they're really unhappy where they're at in life. Then something was a critical mistake somewhere along the way. So I really can't attest to that.
I can very much relate to that, and maybe I phrased my question the wrong way, or you kind of actually supported my point there, or you underlined my point that it's probably all the mistakes that we make along the way that help us grow and evolve into who we are today, and we got to treasure them and acknowledge them for what they are, opportunities to grow and learn.
Yeah, I mean, I call those education. I mean, that's really what a mistake is. A good mistake is, it's part of your educational process. So I don't really look at them as mistakes. And there's a handful of things I probably at one point or another said, "Nah, I really wish I would have done that or did this," but nothing of any major shift in the paradigm or altered the course of things. Just things here and there. But like I said, the sum of all those mistakes is what gets us here. So are they mistakes, or are they just educational times to learn?
It's a very good Very good way of putting it. Absolutely. When you opened your first Smoke Inn, did you have a vision for what it could ultimately grow into? Did you have like that growth strategy, or did you feel very comfortable with that one first shop? I believe Tequesta it was, right?
Tequesta, yes. So to just clarify a few things, I was in the grocery business. I had my own graphics business, and then I was working the family business with my father in the grocery business, and then I was wholesaling and distributing cigars in Chicago, and then I wanted to open up a cigar shop in Illinois. And during that process of looking for a retail place to open up, um, there was already the Smoke Inn was already established in 1996. So I moved to Florida about a year and a half after it was already established, and I was going to open up a Smoke Inn in Illinois. And during that process, we were doing so well in the grocery business as I took over. The cooperative company that we got our groceries from offered me a major location, one that had been around before us, bigger. I think our place was about 6,500 square feet. This place was maybe about 30,000 square feet grocery store. And I guess it was either it had been there forever. I guess at some point it got mismanaged, whatever. They owed money to the co-op, so the co-op took it back, and basically they wanted to give it to me. Here's this grocery store, take it. Just continue the payments on the loan. It's yours. And that was a pivotal point for me, because if I had done that, I'd probably be in the grocery business today. I mean, I just that was gonna solidify my path in being in the grocery business. And I came to Florida on a 7 or 10 day trip just to contemplate that decision. That's when I got exposed to really being in this shop that was already existed here, and that's when I just made the decision. I never went back. So that's how I got into that. But I forgot the original question. What was the original question, Reinhardt?
It was when you started the first job, whether there was a plan for the future.
So I literally, without notice or anything, I didn't even have a car. I flew down here on a round trip ticket. So I had no plans of being here. And then I was stuck here, and ended up flying home probably about 3 or 4 months later to load everything I could up in my truck and come back down. But no, it just was a career choice at the time. I kind of wanted to do my own thing. And then 2 years later, the man I was partners with had moved on. And my thoughts at the time was I was going to continue to run this little shop, and it was going to be my living and whatnot. And it wasn't until I was put in a situation where I had started a private labeling company with, at that time, it was Carib Imported Cigars, which became Camacho Cigars. And they had a Sal Fontana, who had worked with the company 35 years, was one of my mentors. So he told me about an idea they had, and I said, look, you need to do this private labeling thing. I mean, you're doing it wrong. Let me help you, because I had some experience with a similar project in Chicago when I had my graphics company, but it wasn't cigar related, but it could have been applied. So I ended up doing this private labeling program for them, which was extremely successful. I think we did it for about a couple of years. And they were the first people that I know about in this industry that were making private label for very predominant retailers with a minimum order of 10 bundles. You got to put your own name on a cigar band and whatever. And it was really funny because I was making house brand, the labels, the cigar bands for these companies that 10 years later I got to know them on a personal level because I became more predominant in the industry. They knew who I was, I knew who they was. I'm like, man, I used to do the labels for your house brand. You guys just go through tons of them. So it was funny, but I ended up losing that. At one point I think it became so big that Camacho, just at that time, Carib, just started doing their own in Miami and kind of cut me out of the equation. So I lost all this income, right? So I think a lot of my growth at one point was just out of necessity. So I lost this good chunk of income that I had. I didn't know how to replace it. And the only thing I knew I was doing well was running a retail shop. So the easiest way to fulfill it is when we try to go open up another retail shop, which I did. And then things started going very, very, very well. And then Port St. Lucie at that time was one of the fastest growing cities in America, and everybody was urging me to try to open up a shop there. And then we did there. And it wasn't until I really saw I had different partners in the two locations I had at the time, and I really saw that the synergies weren't there. So I needed to find a way to, before I did a third location, to bring it all together. So I found a new person who wanted to be my partner and bought out the other two partners, and we opened up a third location. And then from there was circumstance. the next two locations were retailers whose businesses weren't going well and they wanted to get out, and we acquired them. So it really wasn't a plan more than just a series of events that just kind of led to it. Um, and it was really funny because I would always tell people at that time, you need to find someone else to buy the shop because I'm really the last person you want to buy your retail store. You know, there's really nothing to buy because typically some of these stores weren't set up good, so I have to go in there and remodel it. Your inventory is not as valuable to me as it is to you because I probably buy better than you. And there's really not goodwill because at that point our name was better than your name. So I would really urge them to go try to find somewhere else to sell it first, and then they would come back months later, and we'd end up acquiring another location. We did that 2 or 3 times, and it really was probably when we got involved in the internet and it really started to take off and grow that I began to say, because I call it depth of vision. Everybody has a different depth of vision, how far you could see down the road while driving, right? How strong are your headlights? Some people can only see so far. Some people see very far. Then you have guys like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs who see miles down the road further, and they see a world that nobody's looking at yet. So it's called depth of vision. So I don't think I really acquired any real depth of vision really beyond what was immediately in front of me, probably until halfway into my career, where I realized, okay, there's room to grow. And then we just kept doing things moving forward. And so, maybe in the last 3 or 4 years, we get to the point, I knew at some point we needed a warehouse. So then you have a little bit more depth of vision, where you lead. Like, right now I've even said it, like I don't see our warehouse lasting another 2 years. I think we started one that was a little too small. So I know probably the next 2 or 3 years, we're probably going to outgrow it and have to go another one. So now you're starting to look 3, 4, 5 years down the road. The Great Smoke, we have themes planned out for the next 3 years. So yeah, your depth of vision changes along the way. I don't think you have to be really, really brilliant and insightful to have that kind of depth of vision at the start of your career. Like I said, that's like, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, where they're sitting in a garage and they see a whole new world where technology is going to change everything. That's a real special human being that can see that far down the road.
Depth of vision is a great way of putting it. Other people might throw creativity sort of in the same ring.
Well, you're a very creative person, but how far you want to look down the road to use that creativity and plan it is a whole other thing.
Very true. Yeah, good point. I once heard in an interview that you gave that you sometimes have this thing where one particular food or drink becomes your hardcore thing for a certain period of time, and then you just move on. And
I have a little OCD.
I would not necessarily call it OCD there, but do you become bored easily?
I don't think my head allows me to get bored easily. So I just think my head's just constantly thinking, I mean, if I'm out somewhere at a lounge smoking a cigar, I'll look at their fixtures and say, "Ooh, I like that the way they did that ceiling. I got to incorporate that next time I build a shop." I mean, I look at things in a way where I'm always just thinking forward. If I go somewhere or I see something that could not even be cigar related event, I say, "Oh, I can incorporate this thing in the next great smoke. This thing is great." So I don't think I bored easily, but I do have a little obsessive compulsions from time to time where I'll get stuck on something and then I just move on. But I don't know if that translates as much. No, I guess it does. Like I'll get into a hobby, like I was doing beef jerky and I got really into it, got a machine. I was making my own jerky, making labels, and I got into it for like 8 months or whatever. I haven't made jerky in 2 years now. So I mean, yeah, I guess I do have that. But I don't know if that correlates as much in my business life as it does in my personal life. I think it's more on a personal
Interesting.
life. Yeah, I don't think I'm that way anything about my work and how we work because you don't have that privilege of saying, yeah, I'm moving on from this at work.
Very true.
You have that in your personal life. I mean, I don't feel like making jerky anymore. It's too much work. I'll pay more. I'll go buy the pack. You don't have that option. If you
It's true in business.
Yeah, you get in trouble.
There's probably only so far you can go, and making minor adjustments and certain tweaks or coming up with another idea, but you still stay within your certain limits. What besides the cigar industry is it that you draw inspiration from?
That's a good question. I really think I draw inspiration from everything. I like inspiring things, whether it's cigar industry or not the cigar industry. Um, whether one of the guys I really was into for a while was Gordon Ramsay. Um, just his whole the way he thinks and his ethic. I'll never forget when he was on the phone. I was watching something. He was on the phone with somebody who's trying to give him the inside scoop on whether he was going to get his third Michelin star or not. So obviously, it's an important phone call for him, and he's dealing with this moment. Trying to get his coveted third Michelin star, and somebody from the front was coming, and they're going underneath the phone trying to grab place, and he literally says to him, he's like, "No, no, no." He stops the phone call. You need to be out there on the floor, and this is going to go do that, and then. As he goes back to talking, like literally 5 minutes later, the same guy comes back in and he's in the same spot. He's looking at him. He doesn't know what to do. And he takes the phone and starts tapping it on his head. He's like, what did I just say? And it's the fact that he's on this important phone call, but he's still concerned on what's going on the floor in his restaurant. And, I get inspired by funny things, athletes. Um, yeah, I don't know there's anything in one particular, I see things all the time that I just say, wow, that's amazing. I just get blown away by it. And then if it's something I can, I try to incorporate in my life. I think that's what intelligent and people who evolve do. They try to find something inspiring. They say, okay, I need to try to work this into my life. And sometimes I'm successful at it and sometimes I'm not.
It's a very particular attention to detail as well that's required for that.
The
To
devil was in the detail. That saying doesn't exist for nothing. I tell my staff all the time, it's kind of like a painting. It's really easy to get the big strokes down, right? You could take that big, thick 2-inch brush and start painting the blue sky in the background and everything, but that's never what makes a beautiful picture. It's the really thin brushes and all the details and all the stuff that really makes a work of art at the end. And it's life's kind of the same way. If you run through it just trying to do all the big brush strokes, you never really end up with anything special.
because you mentioned your people and your staff, um, when you run a small business, a small shop, and you're in charge of everything that's going on, that's one thing. Once you grow and once you reach certain depth and width in your operation, a lot of moving parts and other elements come into play. One of which obviously is being the way you manage your staff, the way you hire your staff, the way you treat them, how you keep them. And in all honesty, I don't know of any single industry now that is not heavily complaining about the lack of talent, or you can't find the right people, and how hard it is to retain that talent. How do you go about that?
Well, retaining talent isn't really that difficult. If if you're a good employer, you know how to keep talent, and you need to be conscious of. Look, at the end of the day, employees are human beings. They have life goals, they have dreams, they want to go somewhere, and you could be two types of employers. You could cut a paycheck every week and pay them and be done with them, or you can make that part of your concern, and it typically is. I tell people, whether it's during the interview process or whatever, what is it? Where do you plan on going? What do you want to do? Because if I could help them get there, it's okay. People help me get to where I'm at. So understanding and knowing what's important, because what's important to this employee is not what's important to that employee or that employee or that employee.
True.
So keeping good talent has never been a problem. Finding good talent, that's a problem. I've been blessed to be able to spot them more often than not and just say, oh, this guy, he's got it. It's going to work out great. I'm not batting 1,000, but if it was baseball, I'd be in the Hall of Fame. But the world has changed. It's changed as far as how people want to work. I think that's part of the problem. A lot of people realize they're able to get by a year plus without really having to work, and want to try to continue to find a way to continue living without having to work or getting back out in the real world. And I think that's part of the problem is finding people who really want to work at this point and finding good talent. But if you're, I would treat anybody who works for me the way I would want somebody to treat any one of my children working for them.
Mm.
You know, because at the end of the day, they're really your family. I spend more time with these people than I spend with my family if you add up the hours in life. So,
Very true.
uh, you have to take care of them, and the smart ones appreciate it, and the smart ones see it, and then some. You always have those people who are just working for a paycheck, not worried about next month, not worried, and that's okay too. As an employer, you have to understand that that's okay too. There's going to be people who just want to work for a paycheck, never looking for more, never wanting to grow. And that's okay too. That's not a bad thing. It's just you have to understand that as an employer, that's that type of employee.
Do you feel that today more than ever you probably have to hire personality and values above everything else, and skill is something that you can only give them along the way?
Well, it depends where you're putting them. If you're putting, especially when you have a few facets of the company like we do, if it's somebody who's going to interact on the floor, then having people skills and being able to relate and communicate with people in a pleasant way is just as key as operations. So the operations and the running of the day to days is something that can be taught. The the former, not so much. You can't really teach somebody that. Either they're a gregarious, outgoing person, or they're an introvert and really don't like people. And if you don't like people, being in this business is probably not for you.
Jose.
Abe, how
Yeah,
are you?
look at you. How is the man with the plan?
Well, first of all, great to see you. Great to see Mike, Guy, and Peter, all the guys that are here, everyone. A couple of questions to you. Without a doubt, you've been on our show, and all the media people have said that what you did with the Great Smoke, doing it virtual, was something that just was, I couldn't even imagine it. And playing COVID, for you to do it, get all those people in there, be so successful, and bring people from all over the United States and a lot of people from many countries that watched it. I mean, how did you feel being the first person to do something that you would think could be like Mission Impossible?
I've been blessed in my life to have had that experience a couple times. You're lucky if you do that once in your life. I've been blessed, but that was without a doubt a major thing at that moment. And like I said, it really look. My wife said this all the time. She says my gift is making things happen because we many people we think of things, we dream of things, we talk about things, but then how does the execution process? How do you take that dream, that thought, and you make it real? You make it a tangible, real thing. And that's where 90% of the people will fall off of something. So it literally started with a crazy idea. But and I struggle with this sometimes with staff. It just becomes too easy to come up with the reasons why you say something can't be done instead of really digging down and saying, okay, well, how can we do this? It can't be done this way. What ways can it be done? And it takes a long point, probably sometimes to my detriment, before I get to the point where I say, all right, we just can't do this. It's just not going to happen. Because for me, that's like, I failed. So I don't like to get to that point. So when you attack something with that mentality of, look, there's got to be a way, we will find it. And you don't leave a rock unturned. You call every friend who may know a friend who may know how to technically do something or this and that. And that's the way the world works. It's the tenacity to stay on path until something gets done. Now, obviously, it's one of those things that we had no idea what we were getting into. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. Had I really known the depth of what that project was going to be, what it was going to take to do it, the whole experience behind it, I would have hired a crew and have done like a 2-month documentary following all the steps of putting that together. And I think that's why you won't see it easily repeated, because it really was a monumental task that I think a lot of people, especially 7.5 hours long, live, no breaks. I mean, it was really nuts. you know, it's really funny because for me, unfortunately, the bigger feat was this past year, you know, but it won't get talked about as much because, you know, doing it the first time was so epic. But for us to then take that virtual event and say, okay, this went off great. People loved it. And then we got hundreds of emails from people saying, look, we hear about these mega events, whether they're in New York or Texas or Florida. We will never get to go to one. We can never take that much time off of work. We can't afford the airfare. Please don't stop doing this event virtually. Now, we never, ever, ever thought we would never go back to a live event, because anyone who came to our event this past February knows exactly why. You just cannot express that experience in full digitally. But after that first Great Smoke, the digital experience, we said, okay, we need to find a way to incorporate both. So doing it this year was literally harder than the first year, because now we got two things going on simultaneously. We're catering to a few thousand people there live. And then I got Michael Herklotz on a side stage handling a completely virtual broadcast for everybody at home. And everything had to be timed right. So unlike the first event where it was all static and in one room, we weren't on a hard clock for anything. If something ran long, we cut it short there. If something ran short, we went a little long here. It was very easy. But this, being it was live and virtual, we were on a clock. Oh, the firewalkers are going on stage at 2:31. You know, Abe, you got to be on stage to present them, the camera. So there was a lot of coordination that there wasn't a lot of play. So the timing of it and the production side of it was way more intense doing this event this past February than the digital experience was. But it's like, after you do it the first time, people have this level of expectation where it really wasn't that impressive or that talked about this time around. But for us as an organization, it was really a way bigger feat.
No, without a doubt. One last question. I think this is a question that a lot of people, especially manufacturers and retailers, you know, in 1997, we did 418 million cigars. 1998 and 1999, 50% of imports were gone. This year, we hit 456 million, surpassing by 38 million cigars. And the big question is, how do you see 2022? Do you think we'll stay around 400 million? Do you think a lot of companies will disappear? Or what is the magic ball of Honest Abe tell this old man?
I don't know, it's a magic ball. I don't think you're going to see anybody disappear because no one really popped up during the boom. So, you know, to disappear, you had to have been birthed by this pandemic boom that we experienced, right? During the boom of 97, you saw hundreds. I mean, it might not have been hundreds, but it was a lot, you know, of new companies that came out just because of the lack of any legitimate brands you could find anywhere. You couldn't find a Fuente, a Macanudo. You couldn't find anything in, you know, 96, you know, in the store. So all these brands were birthed by it. Well, the problem is typically if you're birthed by something, you kind of die by something. I think that's what happened in the boom of 96, 97. So I don't think anyone was birthed by the pandemic. But I don't, look, I mean, let's be real and be honest. And I think it's already become evident to retailers across the country and manufacturers across the country. The spike of the boom is already on its way down. It's leveling off. I think there's multiple factors in play. I think a lot of people purchased a lot during the boom, whether it be out of boredom, being at home, smoking more. I think the world's kind of gotten back to going to work and normal, so they're not smoking as much. And let's just face it, the economy's hard right now. I mean, going to the gas tank is like, you know, I grab the jar of Vaseline from my glove compartment every time I have to fill up my car with gas, and you know, everything's costing so much more now. So, you know, finances just realistically from the common person isn't what it was. So I don't think the numbers are very funny, because typically they'll tell a story just from the perspective of how you look at them. So I don't think your import numbers may go down this year, because a lot of those imports are production numbers that were put in last year. So they got to go somewhere. The cigars are being made or made. So they'll probably still filter in this country this year, but I think 2023 will tell a different story. you know, and look, it's not a bad thing. Every peak comes down, every high thing comes down. And I think if if you went into this with any kind of intelligence saying, look, you know, this isn't going to last forever, let's optimize it while we can and make sure we're ready when things level out, you know. One of the reasons why I didn't go build a 30,000 foot warehouse, because if I was looking at what we're doing in the pandemic, that's what it would have required probably, you know. You just realize that, you know, things will end up normalizing. You just, you know, you try to think ahead. But um I think the industry's already seen it. As a retailer, I'm starting to see more deals. Well, they got more deals because they got a lot of product now, some of these companies. So, you know, and I think you'll see it, but I think these are normal cycles that all industries go through. You know, if you don't, you know, whether it's the stock market or anything, they have cycles and highs and lows. And if you haven't figured something out by now, you know, you're in trouble. But yeah, I definitely think it's coming down. Do I think will it go to numbers pre-pandemic? I don't think so. I think the pandemic also caused uh, a new pool of cigar smokers, people who got into it. Some will stay, some won't go, but that's kind of how it is. You know, the nice thing about cigar smokers is the rate of attrition is really, really low. During the course of my 25 years, very seldom do I hear a guy say I gave up smoking, unless it was a real medical issue or something. So our rate of attrition is really low once you get into the culture and the product and the passion. So, you know, the new consumers are being found. So yeah, I think we'll plateau somewhere at a very decent level above where we were, and there'll be something in the next 5 years that may cause things to grow again. I just think that's how things work.
Thanks, Abe. Always great to see you.
You thank you. I mean, I think we're fortunate to the point where I don't think it'll be a crash, right? You know, it's not like the stock market where the cigar industry is going to have a crash and a mass exodus of cigar consumers, you know. But, you know, as you know, on the manufacturing side, different from me on the retailer side, because I'm fortunate enough I get to order what I want, you know. I mean, unfortunate if you run out of stock, but you know, you guys who don't really refine a production timeline and a schedule and get that production going or overproduce, that's where you have the problems. And then what'll happen is there's a lot of inventory going around. So then there's a lot of specials going around to a lot of retailers, and there's a marking down of a lot of product. And you know, and then that stuff stabilizes over time. And I think it's just the way it goes. But I don't see us as an industry or a culture ever having like a mass crash.
Thanks, Abe.
Yes, sir.
Great question, Jose and Abe. Brilliant to hear those very well informed and detailed insights, especially from your side on the retail end. We had a question from Ian here as well.
Good evening, Abe. Really enjoying the conversation. Just a comment first of all. I remember reading Bill Gates's biography, The Road Ahead, and came out in the 1990s, and he hardly mentioned the internet, so even he didn't see everything that was coming. And I hope to visit some of yours. My brother lives near New Smyrna Beach, so that's not too far from Port Lucie. I think that's about a couple of hours drive. But my question was, how do you sort of maintain the atmosphere in your cigar bars? How do you get people to be, you know, comrades, or does it just happen? I've been in some bars where people don't talk to you, or where they're all watching the TVs, and others where I have great conversations. Is there anything that you do or try to do to encourage your guests?
You can't fake it to make it. So it really is, and it goes back to Reinhardt's original question, and this is what I've told people all along. Whether it's a store I'm in or one of our other stores that's run by another manager, that man is at the helm of a ship. He captains it. And it's typically, he sets the tone on what's going to happen. So, you know, we don't do anything, just are this way. My staff is this way. When you come in, whether it's Alex or AJ Smokes or Matt Jr., they're into the culture. There's not a printout, you know, how to be personal to the consumer. You know, it doesn't exist because you can't teach that. They are that way, and that resonates. And you know what that ends up attracting, Ian? It attracts consumers who are that way. If you have a shop that's run by a jerk, you know, guess who's sitting in the lounge most of the time?
Jerks.
People they relate,
Yeah.
right? And their jerkiness doesn't bother them because they're jerks themselves. So, it's just, people find a way to congregate with likenesses. So when we hire people, and our people, our staff, or myself, we are this way, it resonates with our people. And a lot of times what's even more brilliant is when you see them, they weren't that way and they become that way. And that's when it's really awesome. Because I remember one of our greatest stories, one of our longest time customers just moved to Florida. And I was in the old West Palm Beach location, and he would come on his bike, and you have two poodles in his basket on his bike. And he'd come in, get cigars, and either go sit outside and smoke by himself, or he'd leave. And I saw this going on for a couple weeks, and sometimes you don't know. You think people like to be alone, or, I mean, some people, there are people, that's another skill you have to have. Some people want to come and read a book and don't want anybody talking to them. And some people want to come because they don't talk to anybody all day, and their only social interaction they get all day is in the cigar lounge. So, everybody comes with different needs. But I finally said to him, I never met him. He just moved to the area. I say, hey, listen, my name's Abe. I'm Wally. I said, listen, they don't look like they're vicious animals. Why don't you just bring your little poodles and come on inside and sit down? And he couldn't believe we said that. And we've been best friends, and he's been a patron for 20 years now. And he actually lives 4 hours away, and he'll come down for the Great Smoke or our anniversary party, or he came down for my birthday party in January. But that's who I am as a person culturally, right? We're very guest-like. When you're in my shop, you're our guest. You're not a consumer. I treat you like you're a guest in my home. So, and that resonates. And he went from being the guy who sat outside, not interacting really, to the most social person in that whole group during that shop. So that's when it's really cool, when you see the indoctrination of somebody into the culture who really was unfamiliar with it. But no, it's not something you could teach people. And that's the hardest thing to find, is the people who are that way, because you can't fake it. Yeah, that's why my interview processes are usually long, and I'll just talk to people because I want to see them as a person. There are people who are great at their jobs, but aren't people. So I have different stores that require different. I have some locations that one person can run at a time. Most of our bigger locations have 3 or 4 people there at a time. The ones that can only one person be at a time, that's the ones you really got to worry about, because the spotlight's on them 24 hours a day. Right, every minute the store is open. I had a great guy. I had a guy who worked for me. He worked as the part-time guy in one of our satellite stores, one of our smaller stores at the time. And he would be there by himself. Guy was a great worker. He worked great. But I'm going to tell you, in 2 years, I had more customer complaints about him than probably my whole years in the industry combined. And we would have these conversations, and of course he's oblivious to it. He's like, no, I didn't. So, he was a New Yorker, so I kind of just determined, he kind of has this brash, resting face that I think people take the wrong way. And I don't think it was all his part. I just think, he just didn't rub a lot of people the right way. And I didn't want to fire him because he wasn't a bad employee. So I remember saying, I said, look, I don't want to fire you, but I can't keep you there. It's just way too many complaints. And the problem is, when you have a small niche store like that, once you get one people complaining about somebody or doing something, it becomes like a cancer, and it starts to infiltrate other people's brains. And next thing you know, something that may have not bothered them before, all of a sudden it's a problem now, right? Because they've been awoke to a comment or a situation. So I had to get him out of there. So I said, look, I know it's like a 45-minute drive, but I'll keep you on if you want to come here work in Boynton. And he did. He worked here for about 2 or 3 years in Boynton Beach until he moved to Atlanta, and never had a problem with him in Boynton. There was 4 people here. So if he wasn't your cup of tea, this guy was your cup of tea. Or this guy, you just were able to work around him, and that just wasn't a person you interacted with, and never had a problem. But so, yeah, it's very, very hard. But as an employer, look, as an employer, I say, look, you have a shed. It's full of tools. Some people are hammers, some people are saws, some people are flathead screwdrivers. But if you're going to try to cut a piece of wood with a flathead screwdriver, it's not going to work.
No way.
Figure out, if you're really good at employing people, you need to figure out where the best place that you can get the best use out of them, and they'll be happy. And that's sometimes the trick of the job.
And thank you. And if I may, another question: what are your current favorite smokes, and what are your favorite pairings of spirits with cigars?
Well, your timing is bad, because right now, like, this goes back to my compulsive obsessive behavior. I'm smoking our 25th anniversary cigar, which literally just came out earlier this month. This, outside of being a phenomenal product, in my opinion, is very emotional for me because I dedicated.
And that's True Estate, is it?
Yes, it was blended by Herrera and rolled.
Oh, Willie Herrera. Oh, well, it'd be good if it's Willie has done it. So.
Willie blended it, you know, and it was rolled at the El Titande Bronze Factory here in Miami, you know, renowned factory. And during COVID, I remember the news breaking about Carlito and George, who I'm very close with, doing a tribute cigar for their fathers. It was a project, and it was big news when it came out because it was such an exciting project to see, wow, these two great legacy families are going to do a project in tribute to their father. And it was literally during that time, you know, we've done a series of microblends, what I call microblends, since 2000. I think 10 was the first one. And I do these cigars, these very special projects with these manufacturers. And this is such a great thing. I didn't know Carlos Fuente as intimately as I knew Jose Orlando Padron. But I just remember saying, man, this probably would have been cool for them to see. And I said, well, you know, I love my dad. My dad's been a mentor to me, done so much for me. Why don't I do something while he's still here? Why wait till he's gone? So we put it in motion. It was a 2-year project, year and a half plus, almost 2 years. We knew we were going to have a 25th anniversary event and make a special cigar, but I made it a tribute to my father. And the folks at Drew Estate, who we were celebrating their 25th anniversary the same year, so it was very serendipitous. We're very excited to get involved, and Willie had really worked on a couple blends, and one we thought was a big hit, and it was rolled down there. And last August, I had my father come down, and we did a documentary where we started out the shop and then drove down to Miami. It's up on YouTube. We drove down to Miami, and I just interviewed him about his whole life because he has a great story and how he got here as an immigrant and what he did with his family and business. And then we went to the El Titande Bronze Factory, and we got to meet Sandy and Willie for the first time, the people who made his cigar. We saw the cigars in the aging room, and it was just a cool little project. And we just had this big party. He flew down here on May 6th. All the folks from Drew Estates came by, and you know, these cigars started selling May 6th. So we're very proud of this project. So right now, this is my compulsive obsessive cigar, my behavior. This will probably be the cigar I'm going to be smoking compulsively, obsessively for a while. And as far as pairings, I grew up pairing cigars as far back as I can remember with root beer. You know, people laugh when I mention it, but I love root beer with cigars. I don't ever claim to be one of these guy. You know, part of being successful is knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. So I try not to talk about things that I'm not really good at. So that's why you'll never find me reviewing a cigar, because I think I could sum up every cigar I ever smoked into 5 basic categories. That's pretty much it. You know, how far I like them or don't like them. I'm not much into pairings on a personal level, other than like really like root beer is my go-to. It sounds funny, but that's my go-to. I'm having a cigar and there's a root beer label. That's my first choice. But I'll drink anything really with a cigar. I mean, my drink of choice is, you know, whiskey. So I was in Macallan for a really long time, but Macallan obviously dropping off the face of the earth the last year. Very hard to find any of it. Mm-hmm. Someone recommended me a Balvenie, a 14, 15-year-old cask barrel aged, and I've fallen in love with that, and that's kind of become my new libation of choice.
Thank you.
Brian, you had your hand up for the longest time.
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to piggyback on the questions that Ian had about retail, and we talk about it a lot. Reinhardt always talks about atmosphere and all the little details that go into creating the experience as a whole. And I haven't been to like a ton of shops, and I couldn't say when I go in what is the little nuances that make me love it or not. But I just get a feeling, and maybe it's more the people than the details. But I'm wondering if there's one piece about, you know, your places that sticks out to you as being like your favorite little detail that goes into it, or like you're saying, you're always on, you're always thinking, you're going to a place and you're noticing the pictures and this and that. Like is there a favorite detail of yours that maybe goes unnoticed, but you know helps the overall vibe?
On a retail level,
Yeah, or like in a lounge space.
is background noise. I'm sitting in an office in our retail lounge, so it's right outside this window here. And when I walk out, the first thing I notice, if they don't have the music on or something on, I'm like, I literally stop and stare at my guys. I'm like, what the hell? You know, it's like a graveyard in here. I mean, that's supposed to be on. So there's an ambiance of sound, whether it's in the humidor. I like walking through humidor when I have some background music. You know, maybe my cigars like to hear the sounds too. I don't know, but background, a pleasant background sound is key for me. But one of the key things that I really try to teach all our guys is, I like to call it the norm factor from Cheers, right? If someone made it through our front door and got to our humidor door and wasn't acknowledged, you have failed for the day, as far as I'm concerned. I don't care if you're on the phone. I don't care if you're talking to a customer. It doesn't take that long just to acknowledge somebody. Hey, how you doing today? I'll be right with you. That's all it takes. That slight acknowledgement that you acknowledged their presence in your building is paramount for me. And I literally tell them, if they have the time to get it from our front door to our humidor door without being acknowledged, you just consider yourself an F as a score for the day. I don't give a crap what else you did today. You could have saved a kitten from a tree, right? You're getting an F for the day. That's a fail.
Norm. I love Cheers.
Yeah, but what a feeling, right? That's the norm factor. You want to be acknowledged. I mean, granted, everybody in the shop's not going to, turn around and go, hey, Bob, every time you walk in, but just to say hello, or I'll be right with you, or acknowledge them is so simple. There's no excuse it can't be done every time somebody walks in. And if you think
it's
that's
a place for everyone.
Yeah, name. And if you think that's too much for you to, as a guy on the floor, then retail is not your game. Go find another job.
And then you get a brand new young employee and you have to explain to them what Cheers is.
Yeah, unfortunately, as I get older, man, more and more of those moments happen, man. That's when it gets a little bit depressing and you realize, Jesus, how do you not know that? Oh my God, we're old. There's more and more of those moments.
Thank you.
No worries, brother.
I wanted to say too, in terms of the OCD, I'm obsessive chest. I have an obsessive chest disorder, OCD, and people get tired of hearing about it, but so I can relate. Thanks again. Cheers.
You should play our guy. Cheers. You should play our guy, Alex, the GOAT. He's an obsessive compulsive chess guy too. He's on that, I don't know what it's called, chess.org or something or whatever, but I guess he plays with a lot of guys within the cigar community.
Oh yeah, I'll play him. If you know his username on chess.com, yeah, for sure. Alex?
Yeah, well, let me find out.
Okay, cool.
No time like the present.
Cheers.
What's your username on chess.org? I got you some competition.
Chess.com?
Oh, chess.com? Is that what it is? Yeah, what's your username?
Zarmine. Who's my competition?
I'm on a live virtual chat. One of the guys, Brian, he's an avid chess player. I'm like, oh, you got to play our man, Alex the GOAT. So he's hearing you right now. So it's Zarmine, Czarmine.
Got it. That's awesome. All right, I'll send him a friend request from Brian Pond.
Brian Pond. There you go, pal. There you go.
Thanks. I like what you're saying about background noise too and ambiance. My ambiance in the yard is usually a lawnmower from next door, but
the worst
what I can get.
Worst. It's something. Look, I don't know if consumers are conscious of it, but I like to think of myself as the baseline for consumers, right? That I'm in touch with them. When I walk out and I notice it right away, I feel it. I got to be on some level. They notice it too. I mean, I just got to believe on some level because one of those things is like, man, it just sounds like a graveyard in here. Little ambiance just makes it so much more livelier. Such a small thing, but I think it makes a difference.
Abe, the interesting thing that I have learned with me coming from a hospitality background is I believe it takes a bit of not practice, but experience to consciously think about those things and put them in place. But everybody, no matter which consumer or guest, subconsciously recognizes those things. And that's what creates the feeling of, do I belong here? Do I feel at home here? Or is just something off? And people, most of the time, they cannot put their finger on what is it, but it triggers something in you subconsciously. And that's where most businesses either fail or succeed, because they manage all those little components that ultimately add up to the perfect experience.
Yeah, absolutely. It really, really does. And you have to be able to relate to people. I mean, look, this is not something I developed. I was a starting defensive tackle on the football team, in high school. And I was also in the games club playing Dungeons and Dragons, which, I took a little ribbing for, but I didn't care. Right. So, but I was able to relate to two completely different spectrum groups of people. And that's how I relate to people in the cigar shop. I could relate to people. And I think those are the people who will have the most success and making people feel like they belong there, is when they can relate to you. Is when you feel like you cannot relate to somebody on any level, you really don't want to be around them or in that place.
Very true. Very, very true. Let's hand the microphone over to Macy, who I'm sure has a shit ton of questions for you, Abe.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me, Reinhard? Cigar socialites. Not do you want to, can you hear me?
We can.
Honest Abe, I've sent so much money to your store, you beautiful bastard. I just don't know what to say. I got your face on the bags, your connoisseur club. Kicks ass. You got me on that one. Just you run a great store, and I'm building to my question. I got a few observations, and we'll get there, because I'm going to lose my virginity. I'm coming, and I'm going to ask for what I call the eyes wide shut Fidelio secret password for the VIP treatment when I'm there.
All right.
But first, but on the sensory point, I always say, I've got too many, on the show all the time, like, I don't care about cigar boxes. I don't care about the bands. They're pretty. I've been smoking since I was 15. I'm now 37. That's a lot of years. I'm over that. But the truth is, I do actually think they influence me. When I open it, as much as I say that, when I open the, Opus X, one of these really impressive packaging, I mean, the Davidoff Year of the Tiger, if you've seen that, holy shit. I mean, it is, you can't smoke those cigars. They're so beautiful. I mean, so I say it doesn't, but I think I'm a liar on that. And I think subconsciously it does affect me. So Reinhard, I got to say, despite what I say, I think you're right on that. Okay, first of all, I think Jose Blanco, the professor's on. I've always wanted to talk to him. Hola, Jose. Mucho gusto.
Hey, Macy, what's up?
To me. And I want to just say this, and this is leading to my question, I promise. I'm a lawyer and I represent consumers. I'm being sued in Florida. I go to trial in West Palm Beach. Seriously, I'm being sued for $1 million by student loan scammers. You got a lot of scammers in South Florida, former New Yorkers. I stand by my comment. Sorry, you're a Yankees fan. I'll forgive you anyway, I know. But here's the thing, and this is a message I would like, if you can. I know you have Carlito Fuentes' ear. And here's something it's important to me, if you would please relay this message. My inspiration for this lawsuit, they call them slap suits, strategic lawsuit against public participation, being sued by these scammers for representing people that they've hurt and ruined their lives in a fake student loan program. My inspiration for what I'm going through is Carlos Fuente and the bullshit that the Mondavi Corporation and the Rothschilds put him through, trying to ruin his business, trying to take Opus X away from all of us, never letting us have it. And I'm at a point right now, I was late to this because they're trying to force me to settle. They're trying to get me to agree to things I don't want to do, Jose. And my inspiration for fighting them is Carlito Fuente Jr. And I've been through hell the last couple of years. You can read about it. Please tell him that he is my inspiration for my battle that I'm going through next week. And I ask for all your prayers next week, because what I've been through is horrible, and I'm going to win. I'm going to prevail, and I'm not backing down. And that leads to my question, Honest Abe. My victory party will be at the Smoke Inn. It's my first time there. Will you please give me, as a longtime consumer of your store, fan, just lover of your store, if you can't tell, I've got, I don't know if you can see, so a lot of these are your boxes. Can you see my mountain of cigar boxes I got to get rid of? I don't know if that's visible at all. I have most of those are yours, Abe. So my question is, what advice do you have for me for my victory in South Florida next week when I'm in Smoke Inn, other places, restaurants? What are your insider tips for if I have a day or two free down there? What should I do to celebrate in South Florida with a lot of good cigars?
Well, step one, come to Smoke Inn Boynton Beach, our headquarters. That's a great place to start. So I could put you in touch with, look, see, here's one of these things, because I get asked this question a lot. I don't know. I don't enjoy South Florida all that much because I work here. You know, I don't come here as a tourist. That's when they ask me, where's a great place to stay? I don't know. I don't stay here anywhere. I don't stay at a hotel, but I could put you in touch with, I know people who do, you know, I can get you the information. You know, it just depends what you want to see. If good eating, dining, you know.
I mean, El Titan, sorry to interrupt, El Titan de Bronce, is that worth
if you haven't been to
struggling through the traffic to get down? Because I'm being sued in Palm Beach County.
No, if you have not been to Little Havana, the trip down to Little Havana for any cigar guy is key. It's key. It's about an hour away from here. Definitely a must, and definitely go see Sandy. She's an amazing woman. Her little factory is historic, but there's a lot of guys down there you could see. Perdomo, My Father's Cigars.
It's legitimate, not tour. I mean, it's for. I mean, I've been to factories. I mean, it's a real. Not been.
So these are
sadly, this has taken me to South Florida. It's not. I don't know.
It's a factory, but then, like, you know, the My Father people, it's not a factory, it's their office, but they have like a little lounge area, and so does Nick. Nick has a little lounge area as a consumer. You can come in and get a cigar from him, sit in his lounge, and if you're lucky, he's there, and you get to talk to him a little bit. And then there are many factories along Little Havana, so you get a little bit of both, but definitely worth it if you're here for a couple of days.
Any good restaurants near your world headquarters? I will be going there.
Some of the best restaurants.
Hiding my credit card. I'm bringing cash, Abe. I'm not bringing my credit card. You're not going to give me on that.
A lot of amazing restaurants in Delray Beach. You cannot go wrong. Down by the avenue, whether you want Italian or whatnot, there are some great restaurants. Delray, even Boynton towards Delray, there are some good restaurants. And if you hit downtown West Palm Beach, that's a whole other door. So it just depends on what kind of food you like. I'm a Yelp guy. When I want to find something in the area, I go to Yelp. Yelp usually gives me the best feel of finding something that's something I will enjoy.
Well, good luck surviving those Boca Raton attorneys. You have just a really interesting group of attorneys in that part of the world, I'll say. But anyway.
I think attorneys are in every part of the world.
Yeah, well, that might be true. You know, I know in England, there's a guy named Ian, your first question that applies to. But thank you for your time. I look forward to coming to your shop in person. It's really going to be the highlight of my trip.
My pleasure, my friend.
Thank you for your time. Connoisseur Club, join it.
It's coming to an end, the last year of it. So you got about 7 more months of it, and then we're going to put it to bed. It was a cool little experiment. It's ran its course, and we're going to move on.
I imagine it's hard to make money on that. Anyway, I'll stop, but it seems like a labor of love. But anyway, it's very cool.
You know, a lot of the things that we do, and, you know, you hear a lot of people say it, and it's so far from the truth most of the time. But, you know, our approach to everything is not always just about making money. The first 2 years that we did the Great Smoke, and now we're coming on year 17, we lost money the first 2 years. Undoubtedly. I think year 3 was the magic year where we broke even, like, hallelujah. Our main goal the first 2 years was to create something epically on an experience level that people wouldn't forget. They would talk about for the next 6 to 8 months. And they would go home and tell all their friends and want to bring, because if you're worried about making money, if that's your sole motivation for stuff, it doesn't last. And then you made money, but you pissed a lot of people off. And guess what? 4 years later, your event's over. No one cares to come. Right. So we're always about the experiences. Connoisseur Club, so not a moneymaker when you factor in all the labor and putting it in there. You know, if we don't lose money on that, I would be shocked. And, you know, we're not talking like a lot of money, but it's a great, I mean, talk about a great concept when we thought of it. You know, let's get 5 cigars that are made for this club that don't exist. Let's give them to people, not tell them who made them. Let them smoke them, and 30 days later reveal it to them and get the manufacturers themselves to come on and tell them what the cigar was, whatever. So it breaks down that I don't care who you are, we all have it, that prejudice of the manufacturer or that brand. I can't tell you how many times somebody was so shocked to find out who made that cigar. He goes, I hate that brand. I would never smoke anything. It happens all the time. So it's been a cool experiment. And that's kind of really what it was about. It was about, let's just kind of do this social cigar smoking experiment and really see it. And the people who are in that club are so hardcore. They get together, a group of them on our Whereby Lounge, and they will smoke each of one of the fives. They make events and they smoke each of one of the fives together, and they commiserate and they talk about it, and they get on the reveal show with Fred Rui once a month. And so it was a cool project, but no one ever went into it saying it was a money-making project. I mean, we capped the whole club to only 500 people. It was just, we wanted to do it. It sounded like a cool project. So sometimes you do that, because my belief has always been, if I keep creating these awesome experiments that people find and appreciate, they'll patronize us. And that's kind of how things worked over the years, right? They look, another compulsive obsessive thing, now that might be the theme of the show, Reinhardt, my compulsive obsessive behavior, is I'll hit a restaurant and I'll either get moved by the food or the experience. They're like, I want to go there every week for a week, and it drives my wife nuts. Like, we were just there. I know, but I like to spend my money where I like to spend my money. We found this little restaurant in Del Rey called Sorrel. The owner was brilliant. He was great. If anybody follows me on social media, that cappuccino they made, where they did my face in the cappuccino, was at that restaurant. They treated my kids like family. It was entertainment. The food was great. I love that place, and I'll go there as often as I can because I like to spend money with people I like. Nobody wants to spend their hard-earned money with people they don't like. So, my philosophy is, if people really like us and like what they do, they enjoy spending your money. Look, it's easy to sell something to anybody. If I got something you want and you want to buy it, it's easy to sell it to you. But to make people want to spend their money with you is a different art form. And that's how we try to approach things, because we appreciate, look, I work hard. So when I spend my money somewhere, I know I can spend it somewhere else. And I have that mentality with anybody who spends $1 with us. I know you've got a plethora of places you can spend your money, but we hope that if we continue to do what we do, you'll appreciate it and want to spend your money with us. Because to spend your money somewhere where no one does shit for you, never puts it back into you, never does anything for the your community or your culture, that's okay with you, that's okay with me, but that's not how I spend my money. So as long as we keep being innovative, I think that the majority of our patrons appreciate the lengths that we go. They know what we do to put in for the Great Smoke every year, whether it's our Cigar of the Month Club, whether it's our Connoisseur Club, whether it's our virtual events. They know the lengths. So they know that their hard-earned money, when spent with us, gets reinvested into doing stuff for them. The more profitable we are in a company, the more resources that we have to do cool things. I could have never pulled off the digital Great Smoke last year 10 years ago. We didn't have the resources to even try to accomplish something like that 10 years ago. So if you show your community that, hey, look, we grow and we're making money, but we love reinvesting it. We love keep doing things that will keep your experience from getting stale and fresh and cool and new. We believe that people will prefer to spend their hard-earned dollars with Smoke Inn, and that's kind of how we look at things. It's never about the immediate making the dollar.
Abe, how do you think that more people in the retail community could be inspired to follow that role model? And
Reinhardt, and I don't know if things like that are taught. I think it's in your DNA, or it's bred, or it's a philosophy. It's how my dad ran his business. He did good business, treated the customers great, and the profits came the way the profits came. Most people don't want to suffer, right? They avoid suffering in life. And when you do things long term, you have to be willing to suffer. It wasn't easy losing money 2 years in a row in Great Smoke. For many, many people, losing money on a venture is an unacceptable. They're too short-sighted. They don't have the depth of vision, as I like to say it, to say, hey, listen, it's not important we make money now. It's important we make this an over-the-top epic event, and now we've managed to make it an over-top epic event virtually. So now it's not just getting 2,000 or 3,000 people down here. We can open this door to thousands of people across the country. So that whole window is now changed. But once again, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do a virtual event where this is what consumers will be looking at. a flat Zoom screen. That's not exciting. So we had to do it in a fashion where, hey, you looked like you were on a television broadcast watching something, whether like the ball drop on New Year's Eve or something, you know. And luckily enough, we have the resources to pull that off, and the imagination and creativity to pull that off. So, you know, I tell people all the time, you can't be short-sighted. And I think a lot of retailers sometimes are short-sighted. They're too worried about the dollar today, because I'm really a firm believer. If you build the foundation right and you do the right things, the profit and the money comes. You know, if you make the profit and the money your sole concern, it's always short-sighted, because now you got no foundation. You're not building on anything. You're building on a sale. You're not building on a relationship or a community. You're just building on a sale. And, you know, sales are fleeting, as you know.
Excellent.
Today, everybody's
Excellent.
hero. How somebody doesn't like me. You know, you do.
Quite a few things changed the industry, like those quintessential paradigm shifts that we all know about. Online sales have been a disruptive force in the retail landscape, and entirely the pandemic changed a lot of things, and lots of broadcasts and shows popped up, and the whole virtual thing evolved. Like you showed with the Great Smoke how to raise the bar in terms of those virtual experiences as well. Where do you see the future headed? On the one side for cigar retail, but then also for the whole virtual component and the way that cigar media is communicating or broadcasting to the community now.
So ultimately, I'm a firm believer that nothing will ever completely replace the tangible sense of something, right? Like, you know, as much as we'll invest and try to make the Great Smoke a virtual event, anybody who will tell you who came last year is just not the same. But the creative people will pivot, they'll learn, and they will try to communicate. Because look, one of the reasons why I never went into the online business early on in my career is I didn't know how to translate to it, right? Because I knew how to excel locally, because I treated everybody better than any of my competition. I can't tell you how many customers I won because a guy would walk in my store and say, I'd never go back in that guy's shop, you know? So I knew how to translate it on a one-on-one, face-to-face personal level. How do you do that online? And that was my biggest, how can I get this experience, this feeling of community, this message through such a cold substance, right? So that was my hesitation for a long time. And it really was like 2 weeks of badgering from Jonathan Drew that convinced me to eventually say, hey, all right, we're going to try this. And we weren't good at it at first. We weren't good at it because technology wise, we weren't ready. We didn't have the resources, the assets. I was doing all the graphics myself. I had one guy on retainer who was a friend of mine doing all the coding for the website. But I was able to win with little things. Because, like, you know, you turn this website live on, and we didn't have any delusions. Like, the moment we turned it on, these orders would come flying in like you see on those commercials, and it doesn't happen. So we didn't have any delusions, but every now and then an order would trickle in. We're like, wow. So I was so appreciative that someone somewhere I didn't know found my website and said, let me buy a box of cigars for them. I don't even think we had 5-packs in the early days. So let me buy a box of cigars from them. I wrote him a handwritten letter. It's what I wanted to do. Hey, Bob, thank you so much for your order, man. It's deeply appreciated. You know, if you ever think we could service you better, please don't hesitate to contact me personally, because I wanted to let that guy know servicing him was important to me. That was like something I wrote in every letter. We could service you better. Please don't hesitate to contact me personally. And next thing I know, that letter was like the most noted thing about every shipment we ever, most talked about thing. A handwritten letter from the owner at the time, you know? And then it started to grow. And then all of a sudden, you know, okay, I can't spend all my day writing letters. So I'll write letters to only the first time customers. And then that became, so then became, all right, whoever's pulling the orders, writing a letter. But we're still writing letters, and we still do it today. You know, it's something we still do today. So, yeah, I think the virtual world is going to stay relevant. I think the creative people who know how to communicate, because that's what social media ended up doing for me. Right. I was able to really connect with these people through written letters and through other little things and certain projects that we did with manufacturers where they found us. And then I got into Facebook early on, and I'm messaging people. And then when we started our socialite group, it really gave me a stage to really communicate with a lot of our followers, our smoking social group on Facebook. But I think the people who will embrace it and pivot it and will do well, and they'll do well because look, and I say this all the time, and what people do not realize is if you take the United States of America, there's only a few thousand really decent cigar shops. And even some of those 2,000 may not even have lounges where you could socially interact. And that's nothing. There are more convenience stores on Manhattan than there are, premium cigar shops in this whole country. So if you live in this area where you're deprived from this kind of experience and connectivity and socialness with other people who have a like-minded passion with you, how do you do it? And that's what's made our social group and social media and Instagram, it's made it great, is it's given anybody, no matter where you are, no matter what part of the country, if you could have access to Wi-Fi, you could socialize and you can communicate. And I think it's never going to go away. You are seeing it slow up than during COVID because a lot of us have gone back to work. We don't have as much time to dedicate to our lives to social media. But it's never going to go away. I don't think it's ever going to go away. I think it's part of our industry now as the path moves forward.
Bravo. Hey, before we wrap things off, you go live with the KMA Talk Radio on a regular basis, and out of your vast experience hosting live shows yourself, which question would you like to be asked? And then as a follow-up to that, which question do you feel like is just not being asked enough?
Those are okay. That's a tough question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I'd like to be asked. I mean, I've done a lot of these things. I think I've been asked almost everything at one point. What question do I like to be asked? That's a good question, Reinhardt. I think a question I think a question I like to be asked, and the same question I don't get asked enough sometimes is, what differentiates us from everybody else? Because I think you have to do that. You have to find something that says that, okay, we're in the same business. Look, one of the things I ask everybody during an interview is, because I for the most part, I do most of the job interviews, especially for any key position. I literally say, what do you think we sell for a living here? Of course, the 95% response rate is cigars. And it's absolutely not what we sell for a living. Because 95% of everything we have is the same thing that the guy down the street, the guy down the block, the guy 20 minutes away has. They're not coming here for the product. I mean, granted, our selection is more than most, and some people are probably coming here to find product, but for the most part, if you're buying a 858, you're getting it from down there. No one's walked out of our shop saying, man, that 858 was so much better than anywhere else I've ever bought it. No, it's the same cigar. So that's not what's keeping them coming back through the door. It's not what you're selling at the end of the day. So if you understand that you're selling an experience, right? The norm factor, the acknowledging whether the guy wants to read a book alone or he wants to be gregarious and socialize, to make sure that the environment they're sitting in is pleasant and their ashtrays isn't full from 5 hours and it's not clean. And the bathrooms, I'm a bathroom stickler. If I walk in my own bathrooms and they're filthy or dirty, I have a problem with it. Because for me, the bathroom is always the biggest testament if you want to know how any business is run. If I run in a restaurant and the bathroom's filthy, I walk right out. Because that owner, I don't have access to his kitchen or his cooler or anything else, but I have access to his bathroom, and that owner knows I have access to the bathroom. And if it's acceptable in his mind for me to see the bathroom that way, I don't even want to know what's going on in the back room, right? So, that's what you're selling. The sound, the experience, the smile, it's tough. But I tell my employees that, look, I get it, man. I get in fights with my wife. I have problems at home. But you want to know what? When I get here, I leave it at the door. You're never going to hear me complaining about it. No one's coming to our shop to listen to your problems. If you think that makes me heartless, I'm sorry, but no one gives a shit about your problems. Leave them at the door when you show up for work. Now, if they want to talk about your problems, you listen and you smile and you want some advice, help them out. But leave your crap at the door. It's not, when you're here, it's not about us. The TVs aren't what you want to watch. Oh, but I don't give a shit what you want to watch. What you want to watch is not ultimately what's getting on your paycheck. It's what the consumer wants to watch, right? So we have to leave, and sometimes it's hard when you have a 25, 28, 30-year-old guy who doesn't have that kind of emotional control, and they come to work and, they don't realize that their mood is transparent, right? If you come to work in a bad mood, it's felt. It's an energy. And then energy is like a virus. You spread it. And then, the guy working next to you is in a mood. No, man, you do that stuff at home. If you can't, I'd really take a sick day, stay home, right? There has to be an environment. This is what we sell for a living. This is what they will walk out of that shop saying, man, I love coming here. They're always so happy to see me. They treat me good. They put me on a new brands, whatever. No one's ever walked out of here saying, man, that was the best 858 I ever smoked. Right. So that I think is a philosophy that anybody in successful business should really understand.
Amen. Excellent point, Abe. Well, what an incredible show this has been. And I've gotten so many messages and comments in the meantime of people who were full of praise and gratitude, because it's very solid business advice that you've given them. And I think in essence, it's what we all do for a living, no matter which industry you're in. And it's also a way of living, and something that we all should think about more and probably incorporate more into our daily lives, no matter what it is that we do for a living.
Thank you for having me, Reinhard. It's always a pleasure to come and BS. This is like my cigar lounge break for the day. It was nice to be able to socialize.
Very true. It was a privilege and an honor to have you, Abe. All the very best to you. Continued success, and many, many thanks for taking the time and joining us. It was a privilege.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.